When I was 13, my parents moved us out of Tulsa, Oklahoma, and into a small wooded property near a place called Piney Ridge, about 40 minutes from the nearest real town, Tahlequah. If you looked up the area on a map, you'd barely see it. Just a few winding roads, a gas station that doubled as a grocery store, and endless green surrounded by the foothills of the Ozarks. Trees in every direction. No traffic noise, no sirens at night. Just insects and wind and the distant bark of dogs. For most kids, that kind of quiet might have been peaceful. For me, it felt like I had been dropped off the edge of the earth. Back in Tulsa, I lived in an apartment complex where you could always hear something. Cars, music, neighbors arguing, doors slamming. Out here, when it got quiet, it felt like the world had stopped breathing. But I adjusted faster than I thought I would. Mostly because I had something new. Freedom. There were no neighbors close enough to yell at me for wandering the property. No busy streets. Just endless forest. I'd take my bike and ride down dirt roads, follow deer trails, or just explore whatever patches of land I wasn't supposed to be on. And that's how I found the mines. About 2 miles from our house, tucked deep into a forest, off an old logging road, there was a stretch of abandoned mining land. Rusted equipment, old rail tracks half buried in dirt, overgrown trails, the remnants of whatever operation used to be out there before it shut down decades ago. There were at least 3 cave entrances carved into the hillside. When I first saw them, I felt like I'd discovered a secret no one else knew about. I told some kids at my new school, Lakewood Middle School in Tahlequah, but none of them had ever been out that far, except for one. His name was Jackson Miller. Jackson lived about 15 minutes from me, on an even more isolated road, if that's possible. He was one of those kids who didn't talk much, but always seemed curious about everything. When I mentioned the mines, his eyes lit up like I just revealed buried treasure. "Can you show me?" he asked. We went after school that Friday. We rode our bikes down the gravel roads, chained them to a dead tree near the edge of the forest, and walked the rest of the way. When the first cave entrance came into view, Jackson just stood there, staring. It looked like a mouth carved into the rock, dark and unnatural against the sunlight. Rail tracks ran right into it and disappeared into total blackness. Despite how eerie it looked, it felt like finding a hidden world. We walked around the outside first, checking out old mining carts, crushed metal barrels, and collapsed wooden structures. Everything was silent, except for bugs and our footsteps crunching over gravel. Then Jackson pointed at the nearest cave. "Let's go in a little," he said. I didn't like the idea. Standing at the entrance, you could feel a temperature drop, like heat being sucked out of your body. The air smelled damp, metallic, old, like something had been sealed away for too long. We only had phone flashlights. No real gear, no helmets, no extra batteries. "Only a little," I said, "and we don't go so far we can't see the entrance." He nodded. So we stepped inside. The light from outside slowly faded the deeper we walked. At first, we could still see the outline of trees and sky behind us. But after a few minutes, everything beyond 10 feet in front of us was just darkness. The kind of darkness that feels thick. We kept walking, our footsteps echoing off the stone. Then I said, "We should turn back." And that's when Jackson froze. "Did you just see that?" he whispered. "See what?" He didn't answer right away. He just stared toward the entrance. "I swear I saw someone walk past," he said. I felt my stomach drop. Out here, that didn't make any sense. No one lived anywhere close. No roads led to this part of the forest. You had to know this place existed to even find it. Before I could respond, a shape blocked part of the entrance. A head leaned around the edge of the cave opening. We both dropped down against the wall, our backs pressed into cold stone, holding our breath. He made just a slow, quiet kind of laugh that echoed off the cave walls. As he got closer, we could make out details. He wasn't young, maybe late 30s, maybe older. Short dark hair, dusty work boots, a pair of filthy overalls that looked like they'd been worn in this exact place for years. In his hand, he was holding something. At first I couldn't tell what it was, but as he stepped closer, I recognized the shape. A gun. My heart started pounding so hard, I thought he'd hear it. He stopped about 12 feet from where we were hidden. He didn't speak. He just stood there, slowly turning his head, scanning the darkness. I could see his face better now. Dirty, tired, expression almost entertained, like he found something funny. He squinted, trying to see deeper. I remember thinking that if his eyes adjusted properly, we were done. But after a few seconds, he turned around, still smiling, still holding the gun loose, and walked back out into the daylight. Neither of us moved. We barely breathed. We just listened as his boots crunched on gravel outside, and then faded. But we didn't trust it. What if he'd seen us? What if he just stepped outside to wait? We weren't taking that chance. We sat in that cave, in total darkness, for hours. No service on our phones. No way to call anyone. No idea what he wanted or if he'd come back. We didn't talk much. Every faint sound made us flinch. Tiny rocks shifting, wind moving through the trees above, leaves brushing against the entrance. Time dragged. By the time midnight rolled around, we could feel the cold seeping into our bones. Finally, we decided to leave. We didn't use our flashlights. We didn't want to risk showing any light that might give us away if he was still out there. We just followed the tracks, feeling our way forward through the when the faint outline of the entrance finally appeared, my heart started racing again. We were only a few feet from getting out when Jackson suddenly took off running. He didn't say a word, he just bolted. Adrenaline kicked in and I ran after him, straight into the woods. Branches cutting our arms, gravel sliding under our shoes, our lungs burning. We didn't stop. We didn't look back. We just ran. And as we ran, I heard something behind us. Another set of footsteps. Not Jackson's, not mine. A third rhythm, following, keeping pace. I never told him that part. When my house came into view, police cars were already there, red and blue lights flashing through the trees. My parents standing near an officer, panic written all over their faces. They'd reported us missing when the sun went down and we didn't come home. Jackson and I ran up, trying to explain everything. No suspect. No explanation. Nothing. Jackson eventually moved away the following year. I stayed, but I never went back near those caves again. For a long time, I barely went into the woods at all. When I did, I always told my parents exactly where I was going and when I'd be back. Years later, when I asked Jackson why he had started running at the entrance, his answer stayed with me. "I thought I saw him," he said. He looked like he was crouched down just outside the opening, like he'd been waiting. It was too dark to be sure, but I still don't think the fear I've been a caving instructor for almost a decade now, and people always assume that means I'm fearless underground. I'm not. I'm just experienced enough to know when fear is useful and when it isn't. Most people think caves are terrifying because they're dark and tight, but for me, those are just tools, things you learn to work with, like gravity or balance. You don't fight them. You respect them. That mindset kept me calm through hundreds of vertical descents, tight squeezes, and underground rivers. But there are two trips I'll never forget, and one cave in particular that I still think about whenever I clip into a rope. I live in Grand Rapids, Michigan, and part of my job is leading youth groups and outdoor organizations on guided cave experiences around the Midwest. Mostly training, safety, basic techniques. Last summer, I took a troop of Boy Scouts from Kalamazoo down to a vertical system near Marquette in the Upper Peninsula. Nothing too extreme. Mostly a confidence-building trip with some technical elements. But the night before, I realized something I really shouldn't have ignored. One of my main braking racks, the one I'd trusted for years, had been acting weird during practice. Not dangerous, just off. Slightly inconsistent. I made the decision to borrow one from a fellow instructor named Ryan Carter. It looked fine. A little lighter, a little more flexible. I convinced myself it would actually make the descent smoother. That was mistake number one. The cave itself had a straight vertical drop of about 200 feet, with a ledge about 30 feet down, where you could stop and regroup. The plan was to descend, secure the kids one by one, and continue from there. Except, as soon as my weight hit the rope, I felt it. Something this time, every adjustment felt delayed, like steering a car on ice. By the time I reached the ledge, my gloves were burning and my arms were tense. I locked off immediately, heart racing. I didn't want the kids seeing any concern on my face, so I kept my voice calm. "Hey guys, rope interaction's a little weird," I called up. "We're gonna abort this one. Just help guide me back over and I'll climb out." Imagine that, staking your safety on a bunch of teenagers from Michigan. To their credit, they didn't hesitate. Their scout leader, Mark Delaney, stepped in to help with the angles. And within a couple minutes, I was swinging back to the wall, clipping into a safety line, and climbing out. No one was hurt. No one panicked. But hanging there, 30 feet above a dark shaft, knowing that one small mechanical difference nearly put me in a free slide, that stayed with me. If I hadn't stopped when I did, I wouldn't have had enough control to safely finish that R. And caves do not forgive hesitation. Now, that wasn't the scariest part. That came later. A few months after the Michigan trip, I was helping with a training program for intermediate cavers in Carter County, Tennessee, about an hour east of Johnson City. The cave we were using is known locally as Red Fern Cavern. It's not a show cave. No railings, no lights, just raw limestone and water. It's a through cave, meaning you go in one entrance, and under normal conditions, come out at another. Under normal conditions, the cave has 3 vertical drops, each over 100 feet. Most experienced groups only bring 1 rope, because once you clear the final drop, the rest of the exit is a long walking passage to daylight. Simple, efficient, until it isn't. Inside, there's always water. It flows slowly through the system. Between the 2nd and 3rd drop, there's a 400-foot crawlway. Low ceiling, stone floor, shallow running water. You don't stand there. You crouch, move sideways, sometimes even half crawl, depending on water levels. It's actually a beautiful passage. Smooth limestone walls, pale mineral deposits, small white formations dotting the sides like frost on stone. Little soda straws hanging from the ceiling, thin as pencils. The kind of place that feels untouched. But caves are living systems, and they change fast. Let me give you a hypothetical. Let's say a party of 3 experienced cavers enters that system expecting a clean through trip. Weather above ground looks fine. No storms forecasted. Water levels normal. They make their first descent smoothly. The 2nd rope goes mostly fine, but halfway down the 2nd 200-foot drop, one person has an equipment problem. Nothing catastrophic. Just something that leaves him drained, shaken, and not confident he can safely do another long, weighted rappel without help. So the group makes a call. They help him the rest of the way down, conserve energy, and decide they'll work him carefully through the crawlway before lowering him the final drop. But while they were underground, weather has changed. Heavy rain upstream, nothing they could hear, nothing they could see. When they reach the crawlway, forward might be possible, but backward, against rushing water, becomes almost impossible, especially if someone is already struggling. And beyond the end of that passage, another vertical drop. One that doesn't care how confident you were when you started. Here's what a lot of people don't understand about caving. Most accidents don't happen because of stupidity. They happen because of timing. Bad timing. Bad weather shifts. Small miscalculations that snowball underground. And when you're in a confined environment with limited light and rising water, decisions aren't simple. Do you push forward and hope conditions improve, or do you split the group? 1 stays behind to monitor. 2 risk navigating the flooded system to get help. Because you never take an injured person out alone. Never. The minimum safe group is 4 people for a reason. So in a bad situation, it becomes a burden of choice. 2 go, and you trust that the cave doesn't change its mind again before they come back. Every time I train someone now, no matter how confident or experienced they are, I tell them the same thing. Caves are slow to threaten you, but when they do, they do it quietly. They don't roar or announce it. A little more water here, a little less air there, a small difference in rope friction, and suddenly, you're not on an adventure anymore. You're solving a problem. That's why I tell everyone the rule that matters more than any piece of gear. Never go alone. Never underestimate moving water. And never assume the cave will look the same on your way out. Because most people think the danger underground is falling. It's not. It's thinking you have time, when the cave has already decided you don't. My name is Daniel Kinsley, and I'm the vice chair of a caving club based out of Cambridge, Massachusetts. We call ourselves the North Shore Grotto, and we're affiliated with the National Speleological Society. We meet once a month in a basement room near the MIT campus. Usually it's a mix of PowerPoint presentations, safety briefings, and people showing off muddy gear like trophies. We also order way too much pizza. Not fancy pizza either, just whatever's cheapest and fastest near Massachusetts Avenue. You'd be surprised how many new members show up just because of that. But for the real members, the ones who stay, it's not about the food. It's about what's underground. Caving is one of the last frontiers left on Earth. You can pull up a satellite image of almost any point on the planet and see it clearly. But what lies beneath those places? That's still mostly a mystery. According to the National Speleological Society, only a tiny percentage of the world's cave systems have ever been fully mapped. And people like us, we live for that unknown. We've gone on expeditions all over. Kentucky, Tennessee, even southern Mexico once. But 3 years ago, we got an email that stood out from the rest. It came from Ranger Michael Harper of Glacier National Park, Montana. He explained that during environmental surveys in the park's eastern range, a team had discovered what appeared to be the entrance to an undocumented cave system. Satellite imaging and ground tests showed deep limestone pockets, the kind usually associated with large subterranean networks. The park didn't have the personnel or expertise to explore it safely, so they reached out to the NSS, and somehow it landed with us. The email ended with a simple sentence: "If you're willing to take the risk, we'll cover transportation, lodging, and permits." I don't think I'd ever replied to an email faster in my life. I wasn't going alone. 2 other members of the North Shore Grotto joined me. Ethan Hargreaves, an outdoor education coordinator at Boston University, the kind of guy who treated climbing and caving like second nature. He wasn't just passionate about it, he needed it, like some people needed air. And Luis Moreno, a newer member, but incredibly talented. He had this quiet focus about him that made him perfect for tight, high-pressure environments. We packed a van with gear, climbing ropes, helmets, food, water, backup batteries, and enough energy bars to survive a small apocalypse. It took 4 days of driving to reach Browning, Montana, just outside the boundaries of Glacier National Park. We spent the night at a place called Timberline Lodge, a row of old wooden cabins that looked like something out of a hiking magazine. After sleeping in a van for nearly a week, the next morning, we met Ranger Harper and 2 others at a small ranger station just outside the park entrance. He didn't give many details, just that the entrance had only been spotted a few months ago. Too narrow for tourists, too risky for amateurs. Perfect for us. Since the terrain around the site was protected wilderness, we weren't allowed to drive up to it. Instead, they arranged for a helicopter drop-off into a clearing about a mile away. And yeah, it felt exactly like something out of a war movie. The sound of the blades chopping through the mountain air, the wind whipping around us as we climbed in. It felt unreal, like we were being dropped into a different world. In a way, we were. After landing, Ranger Harper led us up a narrow hiking trail that barely qualified as a trail at all. Just a series of rocky shelves and winding paths carved through the mountainside. After about an hour of climbing, he stopped and pointed. At first, I didn't see it. Just rock, moss, and a slope of gravel. Then I noticed a dark reed in the stone, a break no wider than a doorway. "That's it," he said. The entrance was barely visible unless you knew where to look. A mouth hidden in the mountain. We agreed on a call-out time, 8:30 p.m. If we weren't back by then, they'd initiate search procedures, and then he left us alone. The forest went silent in that way only mountains can do. No distant highways, no city noise, just wind and trees, and that hole in the rock. Getting inside was the hardest part. The entrance tunnel sloped downward immediately and tightened fast. There was no walking, just crawling, sometimes sliding. You can't bring claustrophobia into a cave like that. It'll eat you alive. Ethan led the way, carefully checking stability, air movement, and loose stone as he went. Luis followed, then me. We moved slow, methodical. Every step planned, every movement deliberate. After about 30 minutes, the slope leveled slightly. The passage widened just enough to kneel. That's when Ethan stopped. He didn't say anything, but his body language changed. He froze, then quietly cursed under his breath. I crawled up beside him, expecting to see a collapse or a dead end. But instead, I saw some 1864, or close to it. It was almost impossible to read anything else. Just faded ink, smudged sentences, maybe a name, or maybe just stains. But one thing was clear. Whoever came down here over a century ago never came back out. We debated turning around right then and there. But curiosity is a powerful thing. We told ourselves they might have retreated, left their belongings behind, that maybe there was another explanation. So we continued, deeper, narrower, darker. The air got colder, the silence heavier. About 2 chambers later, Ethan stopped again. But this time, he didn't speak at all. He didn't move. He just shone his light downward and froze. When I followed his beam, my stomach dropped. There were human remains, old, crumbled, barely distinguishable as anything recognizable. That this was someone who walked into the dark and never walked out. That's when the other details stood out. Things that didn't make sense. The position, the location, the way the bones were scattered. It didn't look like a simple accident. And then there was something even worse. There were signs. Not carved messages, not writing. Just disturbances in the rock. Pale markings, patterns worn into the stone near where he'd been. but not how you'd expect. Nothing made sense. And that was when a realization settled in my mind like ice water. This man hadn't just gotten lost. Something about this cave had broken him. None of us said anything for a full minute. No jokes. No bleeding jokes. No nervous laughter. Just silence and the hum of our headlamps. That's when Ethan turned around. "We're done," he said. And for once, no one argued. The journey back out felt longer. The tunnels felt tighter. The air felt heavier. Every shadow felt like it was watching. I kept expecting to hear something, a shift of rock, a distant noise, anything. But there was only quiet, a suffocating, empty quiet. When sunlight finally broke through the entrance again, none of us spoke for a long time. We just stood there, breathing, reminding ourselves what air felt like. When the helicopter came back for us, Ranger Harper asked what we'd found. Ethan answered before I could. "It's unstable," he said. "Not safe. Not now. Not ever." The ranger studied him for a second, then nodded. "Good enough for me." And that was that. No follow-up, no second expedition, just paperwork and silence. We never spoke about it after we left Montana. Not at meetings, not over drinks, not once. About that abandoned bag, that notebook with the half-erased date, and someone who went down searching for something and lost more than just their way. As far as I know, the cave entrance is still sealed. Just another anonymous crack in the mountainside, somewhere deep in Glacier National Park. And maybe that's where it belongs. Because some places aren't meant to be mapped. Some places aren't meant to be named. And some darkness was never meant to be disturbed.